This is one of the most unusual haunted sites that I've ever visited. I'm actually standing in what's left of Langenhoe churchyard, and at the back of me, no longer here, was Langenhoe Church. Reputedly one of the most haunted churches in the whole of the British Isles. Why churches should be haunted, I'm not sure, but you must remember that most Christian churches were situated on old pagan sites, usually areas of earth energy, so there may be something to do with that. But this started in earnest in 1937, when a new vicar took over here, the Reverend Ernest Merriweather. He was a typical Church of England vicar, but not long after he took over here, things started to happen in the churchyard, and especially in the church. A figure of a woman was reported being seen in the churchyard, flitting around the gravestones, always stopping and stooping, and as if reading the gravestones. Poltergeist activity started inside the church. Small things at first, things disappearing and reappearing, flowers that have been put in the church being lifted up and strewn about the place. The door of the church banging. And these things were reported not only by the Reverend Merriweather, but also by the congregation as well. Many people witnessed these things. After a period of time, a figure started to be seen inside the church, and Merriweather on frequent occasions saw what he believed to be the figure of a woman dressed in white, wandering through the chancel, disappearing through the wall. And on later investigation it was noted that originally there had been a door there. On one occasion, because there'd been people wandering around the church, sort of vagrants and things, he actually went into the church with an old dagger, which was pulled away from him and thrown onto the floor. And he heard the voice of a woman say to him, "You are a cruel man, aren't you?" Frightened him a lot, as you can well imagine. The manor house, which is just over there, was also reputedly haunted, and Merriweather actually in 1947 was in one of the bedrooms, a bedroom that the owner said he always kept sealed up because he didn't like what was in there. And the Reverend Merriweather was in the room, and he said that he distinctly felt a naked woman brushing up against him. In fact, most of the ghostly reports and occurrences seem to be based on a female. No one's sure who she is, but the amazing thing about Langenhoe Church, and I presume the parish, is that it belonged at some time to the Waldegrave family, the same family that owned Bolli Rectory, reputedly the most haunted house in Britain. We earlier visited the local pub, and they told us how to find this place. They say that the pub's haunted as well, and they believed it to be Arabella Waldegrave, who they've told me is buried somewhere in this churchyard. True? False? At this point I don't know. But there's a certain strange air about this place, something that I've not experienced before. While we were searching for this place, we went to the local rangers, and one of the guys running the place told me that we'd need an escort to get down here. It's Ministry of Defence property, but not a problem, we're here. And he said to me, just when you get down to the graveyard, just notice how many degrees lower the temperature is here. And I have to be honest with you, it's a cold day in January. The sun's out, but it's absolutely freezing cold down here. And this guy told me that he often sees things down here. He's never sure what they are. He says it's the corner of the eye, but you just glimpse things flitting about the graveyard. So I've actually come to somewhere that, well, I've never experienced anything quite like it. And I think they're probably right. It probably was the most haunted church in England. And strangely enough, this area around Colchester, Essex, is prone to earthquakes. In 1884, the church was seriously damaged by an earthquake, and I presume deteriorated over the years until in 1960 it was completely demolished and obliterated. You can now see nothing. But the gentleman from the hall assures me that when spring comes round and the daisies start to grow, for some inexplicable reason, the daisies grow in a line that seems to mark out the old foundations of the church. I'm fascinated by the place, and I think I may well be coming back again. I've just been down to explore the single tower overlooking the estuary. This is all that's left of Hadley Castle. It was built originally in 1230 by Hubert de Burgh, who was a Chief Justice of no less than King John. In fact, next to the King, Hubert Burgh was the most powerful man in England. After he died, Hubert became regent to King Henry III. But unfortunately, for some reason, they fell out, and the young king actually tried to stab Hubert to death. He then confiscated the castle for himself and continued building, as did Edward III up until the 14th century. Unfortunately, all we have now are a few rather magnificent ruins on top of a very bleak hill. But it's reputedly haunted. But strangely enough, the ghost stories didn't start until the 18th century, when smuggling was rife around here. Strange coloured lights were often seen flickering around the area of the castle. This, of course, was an extremely good lookout point for smugglers and an ideal place to hide contraband. And what better way to keep people away than to invent ghost stories? Two of those stories, one of a white lady and another of a black man, were spread around the county. But strangely enough, they were only ever seen just before an illicit consignment of liquor was being offloaded down at the bottom of the hill. But strangely enough, people walking their dogs, people visiting this wonderful English heritage site, still say that they see a strange figure, the figure of a white lady that still wanders around the place. Who could it be? We're not sure. But this castle was let out to various tenants on condition that on their death it returned to the crown. Three of those tenants were ex-consorts of no less than King Henry VIII. Anne of Cleves, Catherine Parr, Catherine of Aragon. All tragic women. Is it possibly one of those queens of Henry VIII that still wander around this castle to this very day? Perhaps we'll never find out. Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that English heritage would allow people to come here and conduct seances. Right, well, I'm inside the Anchor, in the middle of Canewdon, and with me is Del, who... You've seen a ghost, haven't you?
Well,
you've seen more than one, haven't you?
I'm pretty sure I have. Yeah.
Really?
Exams.
Come on then, tell us all.
Well, back in about 1992, come home from work about 1:45 in the morning, driving up Scottshall Lane on the little motorbike. All of a sudden, from nowhere, like a dark greyish cloud in front of, and I slowed down. I thought, what the blooming hell is that? I slowed down, and it just drifted across, like across the fields. Carried on line home. I live about a mile from where it happened. Got home and I was shaking like a leaf.
I think you were.
Went indoors, I woke my wife up.
You actually woke her up to tell her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
is something we don't normally do,
because
do we?
I was
We let them
shaking.
sleep, don't we?
And in my own head, I'd heard stories from when I first moved here about this, that and the other. And I thought, what people told me, I thought they'd probably been joking about it.
Yeah.
It really spooked me up.
Yeah, in other words, it was probably true.
Yeah, spooked me up. And from that day to this day, I've never ever driven up there on my own.
You're
I went
joking.
the opposite road and went the man mile way. Bit
To
longer
avoid
there.
in case
Yeah,
it really
because
happened.
it frightened me.
I should think it did. Because the amazing thing is that there is a ghost story of a witch with sort of staring eyes, an angry witch that rises literally from the grave in St Nicholas's Church and comes down the hill. It's a grey lady, grey witch. Sometimes
Couldn't figure out what it was, but whatever it was, it spooked me.
Yeah, I should think it did.
It's just like...
I mean, did it look like a person?
It looked like... It's a very small thing, but it just went across.
In front of, I mean, I presume you thought you were running somebody over or something.
Got slowed down.
And went through it,
Yeah.
waiting for the shot when you hit
Just
somebody.
went through and went round the bend, and I thought, what the hell's that? It was just like that.
Amazing. That's quite something. So it's convinced you, I presume, that there is something.
Well, it spooked me, because I've never gone that way since.
Now they also tell me that the actual pub itself is haunted. I mean, legend has it that it was possibly a witch that was locked away by her uncle or something like that, but you've got...
Well, I wouldn't know that, but I drink there every weekend. And myself and my friend Dan, sitting there, and the landlord at the time, John Shaw, there's a couple sitting in the top left-hand corner, having their meal, and all of a sudden the lady just froze. And by all accounts, she said to her husband, there's a young girl standing in that corner in Tudor-style dress. And she stopped eating. She said, I can't believe that. John come and told me and Dan, thought nothing more of it. And then about a fortnight later, there's a young couple in the village, and the girl's mother was from Germany and her father. They'd been over on holiday, and they sat the opposite side, about 2 tables down.
Same place?
And basically it's the same scenario. The woman stopped eating and said, see that girl in the corner, she's all in Tudor style. And John come down, he said, I can't believe what's happening here, he said. He said, it's putting people off.
Yeah.
Isn't he? Because they're all seeing this girl with a... They described it with a white stuff and the old Tudor stuff.
Like a
with
sort
a
of
winter work
cap
thing,
and-
but they see her standing in that top left-hand corner. Well, the position we normally drink in, was not that we see it ourselves, but they seen it. And to get that within a fortnight seemed uncanny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
You could understand if it was sort of the same day or someone had heard someone else talking
but
in
it's
the
a
bar.
fortnight, it's Saturday, and it's on a Sunday.
And one of these people actually had come over from Germany.
Well, a couple, yeah, they're visiting their son and daughter-in-law.
So they wouldn't have known anything about what happened the fortnight before.
No. And to me, it just seemed uncanny, I thought.
Yeah.
And then about 2 months later, John asked me if I could do some painting here. And I worked here for about a week and a half. I was doing a daytime job, going home at 5, coming back here at 11. And from the public bar end, no problem with that. Got into the halfway through the restaurant, heading up to that corner. And every night, about in between 2.5 hours, I'll stop painting, have a fag and have a bottle of Coke. Put my glasses down. Went sat a seat long, had my drink there, put my glass up, and this is so untrue. Put my glass up, and they've snapped it in two. And I'm doing the panels in the ceiling, and I thought, what am I going to do now? Got another 3.5 hours work, and
No glasses.
I ain't got the glasses for cutting in.
And you hadn't sat on them or anything like
No, I ain't at all. And I thought, but it just seemed, the further along the restaurant I went, the colder it got.
that? Really?
And different people, like regulars, say to me, "Isn't you spooky, Dale?" I said, no, I haven't felt it, not until I got up that in. And within the last couple of days, I just thought myself a big glad when I finished this job. Because I was getting myself spooked then, because I thought, there's things here, ain't real.
I like it.
and that's the way it was.
That's fantastic, Del. That's super. So the place is haunted? Well,
I believe myself, because it, you know what I mean?
and the village is haunted?
The village, I should imagine, is very haunted.
You're a gentleman. That is fantastic. And I think I owe you another pint. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
The last self-confessed witch or wizard didn't die until 1909 here in Canewdon in Essex. He actually took over as witch master from Cunning Murrell, who lived in Hadley. He said that he had a pact with the devil and could exorcise witches, demons and spirits. When George Pickingill took over, he used to cajole the local farmers into buying him ale. He said that if they didn't, that he would stop their machinery. Old George had a little old cottage just outside the village, and if anyone dared to go up to his cottage at night and peer through the windows, they would see him dancing around the furniture with his familiars, little white mice. If you stayed there long enough looking through the windows, you would even see the old grandfather clock dancing with them. George used to get his familiars to do the work for him because he was an itinerant horse dealer and also worked on the land, but said that he could get the work done in half the time by letting his familiars do the work for him. George lived to the age of 105, and one day was walking past the churchyard here. It was a cold, windy, cloudy day. George's hat blew off and landed in between the graves in the graveyard. He went through this gate to get his hat back, and the sun came out. It cast the shadow of a cross on one of the gravestones across George's face, and he dropped dead in this very graveyard. And it's said that he's buried somewhere here in an unmarked grave. There are ghost stories, of course, to do with this graveyard, and an angry witch is supposed to rise out of the graveyard, float down the hill, across the road, sometimes towards the pond, sometimes towards the river. Is it the ghost of old George, buried in unconsecrated ground without a gravestone? Perhaps we'll never find out. All we know is that that ghost really does walk, as we were told earlier tonight by Del in the old pub. If I step back any farther, I'll actually be in Canewdon Pond, and then I may drown like many of the witches did, or supposed witches. This could be a pond in Huntingdonshire, or in Norfolk, or in Suffolk. This one, of course, at Canewdon in Essex is haunted. It's haunted by the ghost of an angry witch that rises from one of the graves in unconsecrated ground in St Nicholas's Church. Sometimes it's seen drifting down towards the crossroads. Other times it's seen down here at the pond. Probably one of the many supposed witches that were drowned by Matthew Hopkins in his 14-month reign of terror when he became the Witchfinder General. He originally hailed from Manningtree, moved to Mistley. The White Horse at Manningtree is haunted by his ghost and some of his victims, as is the Thorn at Mistley. Matthew Hopkins is also supposed to haunt the area where he was buried, in Mistley. Many ghosts are seen around many ponds in Essex, and at this one. Why ponds? Because one of the many things that Matthew Hopkins did to extract a confession from these supposed witches, these poor old ladies, your grandma, 80 years of age, a few teeth missing, a wart on her face, possibly left-handed. All she needed to have was a pet dog, a pet cat, a pet mouse or a pet bird, known as a familiar, an imp, a spirit. Matthew Hopkins would torture them, either by making them sit cross-legged on the floor for over 24 hours, or to keep walking for over 48 hours round and round a room, or he would swim them in a pond like this. He'd tie their right thumb to their left toe, their left thumb to their right toe, and throw them in the pond. If they sank, they were innocent, and they would get a decent Christian burial. If they floated, they were rejecting the Christian baptism, and they were a witch, and they were taken away and hanged. The most he ever did was 19 in one go at Chelmsford. So why should they haunt? Were they really witches? Were they evil? No, of course not. All it needed to be was someone that lived in the local village. You wanted to get that little bit of land at the end of the garden. Perhaps you wanted their cottage. And in those days, between 1645 and 1646, England was in turmoil. Not only at war, but religious turmoil. Protestant against Catholic. These people, these supposed witches, were nothing more than the wise ones of the village. The wise ones were known as Wiccans. Wicca, or witchcraft. And unfortunately, so many of them, something like 400 deaths at the hands of Matthew Hopkins, mainly in and around Essex. So these poor old ladies that had done nothing other than healed people, healed their cattle, helped them to make the crops grow, had the fickle finger of fate pointed at them, were dragged away, tortured and hanged. That's why they're angry spirits. That's why they still haunt. Most of them, of course, were buried in unconsecrated ground. Some of them even buried with a cage over their grave to stop them rising. And in the case of a lady that was hanged in 1589 and buried at St Osyth, she was actually found in Mill Street, St Osyth, in 1921. Her shallow grave still there. And when they saw the skeleton, they found that metal rivets were driven through the joints to nail it to the ground, to stop the ghost of the witch rising from her grave. So no wonder these poor old ladies are angry. No wonder they still wander around the crossroads and the ponds and the places that they were executed. Still to this day, in Essex, the witch capital of England. I'm standing on the Strood, which is an ancient causeway over the estuary to the Blackwater River. Behind me, Mersey Island. It was a very important Roman stronghold, and numerous people have reported seeing and hearing the ghosts of Romans. On Mersey Island itself, people frequently hear the sound of battle, clashing of swords, horses' hooves, and the screams and the cries of wounded men. Roman soldiers are often seen here on the causeway itself. A gentleman driving back, yes, from the pub, but with 2 naval ratings, actually believed that he ran into someone that he thought was returning from a fancy dress party, dressed as a Roman soldier. They obviously got out of the car to see if they'd hit someone, and they never found a body. A taxi driver driving back from Mersey Island ran into a horde of Roman soldiers running across the causeway. He never heard any bumps or anything. He was terrified, and when he got home, he poured himself a very stiff brandy. West Mersey Hall is haunted by the ghost of a lady. On frequent occasions, they hear the laughter of a woman. The hall is built on the foundations of an old Roman villa, and it's believed that she was a house guest of no less than the Emperor Claudius, who drowned in his swimming bath. There are so many stories to do with this place that you could almost make a DVD of the ghosts of Mersey Island. On the corner of Colchester Road and High Street, a woman in a strange black hat and a shawl is often seen walking into the middle of the road. People slow up and brake, and then she just disappears through the hedge. Only last night, when I was interviewing Derek Ray, who does the Colchester Ghost Walk, he was telling me of Black Shuck, the large black dog with pointed ears and shaggy fur with red or yellow staring eyes that haunts the area around here. His wife's uncle was cycling back over the causeway and was literally knocked off his bike by a large black shaggy dog with pointed ears. He believed it to be Black Shuck. These legendary dogs are seen all over the country. They're known as Padfoot, Barguest, Skriker, and here in Essex, Black Shuck. But unlike the other black dogs, which mainly are harbingers of death, if you see one, you or a member of your family will probably be dead in weeks. But not so over here in Essex. For some reason, they bring us more of good luck. But in the case of Derek's wife, Uncle, I don't think it brought him much good luck. When he arrived home, he was battered and bruised and scratched, and he had to have a new wheel on his bicycle. But nobody really knows why this area is so haunted. Maybe it's something to do with the water, the river, the Earth's energy, electromagnetism around here, or the number of battles that actually took place when the Romans were here. Nobody knows. All we know is that this part of Essex is very haunted. This place has taken some finding, but I'm actually in the ruins of Bolli Church. It's quite famous. In fact, when the Reverend Baring Gould wrote his famous novel, Melhalla, he actually used this church for the setting for the wedding between Melhalla and Elijah Rebo, actually here in this church. Now, of course, this is legend, but there are some very interesting facts to do with this church. And of course, when it was complete, its church tower was used as a beacon by smugglers. Not only that, but on Sundays, the congregation was always swelled by the number of smugglers that actually took part. They were here to make sure that no one spotted the contraband that they were hiding here in this church. The church is supposed to be haunted. I've just asked a local farmer for permission to actually come onto the land, and he said, yes, not a problem. He says, of course, as kids, he said, we used to play around here. There were many ghost stories. None of them, he says, that I can prove. There's only one grave left, a grave just on the right-hand side. And he said that as kids we were told that if we threw a stone high into the air and ran round the grave 3 times, we'd summon up the devil. But he said we even tried catapults, but we could never get the stone to go high enough so that we could get round the grave before the stone landed. Lucky for them. But there's another story, a story of a huge grave that's supposed to be here somewhere in the graveyard. The grave of 22 excisemen that were found floating dead in a boat near Mersey Island. All 22 of them had their throats cut. I wonder who by. They were brought here to Bolli Churchyard and buried in one large grave with the upturned boat on top of them. Legend has it that their ghosts are seen trooping along the footpath away from the graveyard. True? False? I don't know. But you must remember that what's the best way to stop inquisitive children and villagers from coming near the church in dead of night and finding the contraband? Make up a ghost story. Well, you know me, I'm game for anything. I'm standing by the grave, I've got a stone, I'm going to throw it in the air, see if I can get round 3 times, see if I can summon up the devil. Ready? No, you can't do it. No, it's landed. No devil for me tonight. Just look at this sign, Bolli. Just up the road here on the left-hand side, the site of the most haunted house in England, Bolli Rectory. It's gone. It burnt down mysteriously in 1939. But I'm going into the grounds of Bolli Rectory. It's the 28th of July, the night that the nun walks. I'm here with a group called Parascience, and we're going to do an investigation in the grounds of Bolli Rectory. So come with me up the road for an exclusive visit. Nobody has been here since the 1970s. Right, now look, 10 of us have come here to the grounds of Bolli Rectory tonight. And with me is Anne and Steve from Parascience, who in my opinion is the very best paranormal investigation group in the whole of the British Isles. I genuinely mean that. Now come on, what does this mean to you?
As a small boy, I remember looking at pictures of Bolli Rectory, the most haunted house in England. We're here. We're standing close to the spot where that picture was taken.
I know.
It means everything.
Look at the back of us, look. Still there, the cottage.
I'm so excited about being here. My only one reservation is the fact that everyone knows the story so well that it might colour what they're actually feeling and seeing here. But at the end, who cares? We're in Bolli. It's a lifetime's dream.
Isn't it, for everybody? And just to be standing on this hallowed spot, with all the equipment you brought with you as well.
Yes, yeah.
More than anybody.
We're hoping if the nun walks tonight, she'll walk right past our cameras.
Oh boy, it's going to be great. I mean, isn't it something special? I think nobody's done this since the 70s.
Harry Price he established the concept of scientific paranormal investigation. He was the first to take cameras, to take thermometers into haunted locations. This was his landmark case.
Yeah.
We're here too.
Yeah.
We're paying homage to Harry. We're the scientific investigators of the 21st century, but we owe a lot of this to Harry Price.
Of course, of course. And how do you feel? Because, I mean, he is a bit of a hero to you, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's the 28th of July.
It is the 28th of July.
How many times was Harry standing probably on this spot?
At least 3.
Wow.
At least 3 times.
And now you're here in his place.
Without the pipe.
Without the pipe, but who knows? He might be with us tonight.
Let's hope he is.
I'd like to think so.
So would I. Well done, chaps. We'll see what happens later. I'm standing on one of the most famous haunted sites in the whole world. I'm in the village of Bolli, and behind me here, the Nun's Walk. I'm standing in the grounds of what was once Bolli Rectory. It was built in 1863 for the Reverend Henry Ellis Bull and his 14 children. Not long after they moved in, ghost stories started. Legend has it that on the site of Bolli Rectory was once a monastery. 7 miles up the road, at a place called Burrs, was a nunnery. A nun is supposed to have eloped with a monk in a coach and horses from here. They were captured. She was walled up, and the monk was either beheaded or hanged. True or false, I don't know. But ever since, there have been ghost stories about this place. On frequent occasions, a ghostly nun has been seen wandering along this wall here, known to this day as the Nun's Walk. At the back of me here, a hidden stream. The first real sighting by the Bull sisters, 2 of them, sitting in the grounds on, guess what? July the 28th, 1900. Tonight, I'm standing here on the same spot. It's July the 28th. We have Parascience with us. We have all sorts of paranormal equipment. We're going to be sitting up all night, waiting, with cameras ready, to see if the nun walks again tonight. After the Bull sisters saw the ghostly nun on the Nun's Walk, their brother Harry Bull, who inherited the rectory, used to spend many, many hours sitting in his summer house, just over there behind this tree, watching for the nun. Quite amazing, because I've just realised that this rather large tree is a walnut tree. The very same walnut tree that is in a very famous picture taken in the grounds with Harry Bull in the picture. It's grown up rather a lot, but there are actual walnuts on here. Perhaps I could have one, take it home and plant it, and have a walnut tree in my garden from Bali Rectory. Right, it's a hive of activity in here. I'm doing my stint in front of the monitor. It actually looks like daylight out there, but it isn't. Got the most incredible infrared light outside. And this is lighting up the Nun's Walk. We've been here for hours watching. I have to say, up to now, we've seen nothing. But it's dawn, it's 4:49 in the morning, and a lot of sightings of the nun have been seen in the early hours of the morning, so we haven't given up yet. There is still time. There is still hope that we may see her. But nothing yet. I shall keep watching. It's 4:45 on the 29th of July, and I'm now in the graveyard of Bolli churchyard. For some reason, when the rectory was completely demolished, and to a certain extent the ghost stories stopped, all of the ghost stories seemed to move over here, to the church and the churchyard. The nun was reported seen here, wandering around the churchyard, and on tape people have heard taps, bangs, a door creaking and closing, and horrible ghostly groans inside the churchyard. I'm actually in the middle of the graveyard, and here in front of me the grave of the Reverend Henry Ellis Bull, the man who built Bolli Rectory. This is the grave of his son Harry Bull. I'm very concerned about being in here. It's dusk, and apparently the amount of ghostly sightings, both in the graveyard and in Bolli, double by 2 to 1 at dusk. There have been quite a few people actually in the graveyard during the night, because it was the 28th of July, and I'm not sure whether they've gone. But I have to be quite honest with you, I am very concerned about being here. I don't like it. I don't think I'm going to stay here very long. Steve, obviously we're in the graveyard. The famous porch of Bolli churchyard.
Yes.
I mean, come on, tell me what happened here.
Well, one of the most commonly reported phenomena in the churchyard is footsteps walking up the gravel path, entering the porch and stopping.
Yes.
Look, this is not a gravel path.
I know it's not.
This is a flagstone on grass.
Yeah, yeah.
The nun has also been apparently seen here. Interestingly, we were out earlier tonight when it was much, much darker than it is. We're just starting to get some dawn light in the sky now. And you can't make out figures.
Ah.
It's so dark.
I know.
And it does question some of the witness accounts,
Yes, indeed.
where people have said, we saw the nun after dark. It really is dark here. We've got the benefit now of the lights from Long Melford, which are lighting,
Yes,
are
indeed.
casting some light.
Yeah.
Back 20 years ago, when these accounts were coming from, they didn't have that. So unless it was a very bright moonlit night, I would question the validity of some of those accounts. They may have seen a black shape moving through the graveyard, and then it's the nun.
But was it the nun? Or
But I don't think there was any definition in what they could see.
And I mean, even tonight while we've been here, there have been people in the graveyard, haven't there?
There were a group of people that we completely failed to see.
Yeah, I know.
We completely failed to see them.
And there they were. Now, this is, of course, the porch where the BBC left a tape recorder.
Which
playing.
was wrecked.
Totally wrecked. All the tapes
apparently attacked.
pulled out. And so, I mean, I don't know. There's something here, isn't there?
For me personally, the church is a very unsatisfactory case. Because it was... They had the evidence from the BBC, they had the evidence from the group recordings from recorders left inside the church, which produced some fabulous sounds.
Absolutely incredible groans, a door creaking and closing, bangs, thumps, raps and taps.
But then the investigation stopped.
Yeah, I know.
No follow-up,
No.
no investigations were done after that time. Perhaps it was because it's certainly the residents of Bolli village are not welcoming to the paranormal investigators. Perhaps that was what stopped the investigation. But to me, there are a lot of unanswered questions about this location. I would like, at some point in the future, my wish is to pursue and find an end game to the church investigation.
To get in through these gates and do our own investigation.
To put equipment in the church to replicate that last experiment done in the 1970s. To see if we get our own recordings. To see if modern technology, modern recording apparatus can maybe shed some light onto what those sounds were.
Who knows? One day they might let us in. I cannot believe that I'm doing this. I'm in the middle of Epping Forest, and I must be honest with you, tonight, it's true to form. It could be called Epping Forest. It's snowing like blazes, but we have to finish the DVD, and we couldn't do it without doing Epping Forest. This goes back thousands of years, of course. It was a hunting forest. It was home to foresters, vagabonds, gypsies, robbers, footpads and highwaymen. It was huge. It stretched all the way from Bow in London almost to Cambridge and to Colchester. It was originally known as the Great Forest of Essex, and then the Forest of Waltham, and now Epping Forest, and it's a freezing forest as well. There are ghosts here, otherwise I wouldn't have come. The oldest ghost that we know of, or ghosts, are the ghosts of Queen Boudica, or as I knew her when I was a kid, Boadicea, and her daughters, who's often seen near to Amesbury Banks. There are other ghosts as well, and I would think that at least 12 times a night the ghost of Dick Turpin is reported in the area around this forest. Turpin was originally born, he was an Essex man, he was born in Hempstead. His mum and dad ran the Bell Inn. Dick was originally apprenticed to a butcher in Whitechapel, but as many young lads did in those days, of course, he got in with a bunch of smugglers round the Blackwater estuary. It soon turned to robbery, and he joined the Gregory gang. Not only did they rob people, but of course they tortured them so that they tell them where their goods were, where their wealth was. Dick went on, of course, to be a very famous, the most famous highwayman. But how can so many people report seeing the ghost of Dick Turpin? He didn't die here in the forest. But of course you must remember that any spectre seen with a tricorn hat and a mask and a couple of pistols, whose ghost had they seen? Dick Turpin's. I'm not far away from Dick Turpin's cave. It was huge. It was big enough, so they say, to actually take him, the contraband, and also the stuff that he'd stolen from people, and his horse. And in 1739, Dick was discovered by a guy called Tom Morris, who actually found him at the cave. Tom had got a musket with him and pointed it at Dick. He was going to arrest him and get the £100 reward. Dick backed away from him to the mouth of the cave, grabbed one of his pistols, and he was quicker than Tom Morris, and he shot him dead. The reward after that went up to £200, because he was now a murderer. And Tom's ghost is said still to haunt this area to this very day. I don't like it in here, I really don't. I'm not totally alone. Wills is here, thank goodness, filming me. But there's an uneasy atmosphere, but then again there would be. These are the dark, dark woods. This is what everyone was frightened of for thousands of years. Not ghosts, but people were terrified of going out into those dark, dark woods at night. Why? They were frightened of what was lurking behind one of the trees. There could well have been, in those days, a saber-toothed tiger. So, the people that went out at night, that dared to go out, were eaten by the saber-toothed tigers. Those with the fear gene, the ones that survived, the ones that daren't go out, they survived. And of course, you must remember, it's the fear gene that's passed down all these thousands of years to us to this day. That fear gene that kept us alive. There's a tree just over here. I'm just going to check to see if there's anything lurking behind it, like a saber-toothed tiger. But no, there isn't, thank goodness. One other interesting story, a gentleman in the woods, the Reverend Dr. Gold, was actually, I presume, taking a shortcut through here. He was accosted by a footpad, a robber. The Reverend put his trust in the Almighty, walked towards the footpad singing, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah." It struck terror into the footpad, who fled and was never seen again. And the doctor carried on to his destination safe. It's, I think, definitely time for us to leave. The snow's getting worse. It's getting darker. And I don't want to stay in the dark, dark woods at night. So I'm going to beat a hasty retreat out of the woods.